Okay. Thank you very much for joining us. You have joined us on Have Your Say, a virtual edition. I'm honored to be with you. My name is Ajuri Ngelale, and I humbly serve as the Senior Special Assistant to President Muhammadu Buhari on Public Affairs in the Office of the Vice President. Today, we're going to be looking at transport and economy, how the two interrelate, and how transport projects ultimately will create jobs in a diversified economy. I'm looking forward to your WhatsApp messages on the number, as you can see on the screen. You send your messages to that number. I look forward to answering those. And of course, there's a call-in line on the screen, which you can use to call in, and hopefully you'll be able to get through, and I'll be able to answer your questions directly. It's an honor to welcome you all to this program. And without further ado, let us get started. We await our first caller. Okay, so there's no caller at the moment. So I think where we'll start from is, let's take a look at the projects. The projects that are on ground at the moment. You will now look at across the country. Mr. President, since 2015, has consistently invested in infrastructure projects from rail to road, to bridges, airports, seaports. It's been a major undercurrent of what it is that the president wants to achieve for Nigeria during the time of his administration. Now, from 2015, we know that our oil and gas revenues essentially have been halved in terms of what they were between 2011 and 2015 or 2014. And so we have had to be very, very selective and very surgical in our approach to infrastructural development, particularly around the transport sector, because the president recognized very clearly, very early on, that indeed it's going to be our ability to overcome many of the transportation bottlenecks across the country that will essentially determine how effective we are in terms of facilitating import and export flows in the country, and bringing in the kinds of industries, factories, and organizations that will massively employ our people. And so the president went to work, starting, if you look at the western axis of this country, you will see the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, which of course had been abandoned for decades. The president worked very assiduously to ensure that that project is completed during the life of his administration. Already it has reached a very advanced level of progress, and it's set for completion in 2022 after about 40 years of neglect. Then, of course, partnering with that, you would have the Lagos-Ibadan high-speed rail line, which in 2017, there was not even a piece of a bar of track on the ground. And now, of course, you have a fully completed track all the way from Iju in Lagos to Abeokuta, all the way down to Ibadan, for example. Those are just in the western axis. I'm sure as the program goes on, we're going to be able to get into some details about many of the projects in the country and how they're going to impact on the national economy. We have a caller on the line, or we have a question, rather, from Mr. Peter, who is calling in from Bayelsa State. And the question he has for us is, how does government engage people in the rural settlement to create employment through transportation? Fantastic question, Peter. That takes me into the economic sustainability plan, because what you have there essentially is you have the economic sustainability plan as the product of the Economic Sustainability Committee constituted by President Muhammadu Buhari, chaired by Vice President Professor Yemi Osinbajo, that is tasked with enacting an immediate economic stimulus in the country of about 2 trillion naira approximately, that would essentially develop the nation using wholly indigenous Nigerian companies who use a wholly indigenous Nigerian labor, who will use wholly indigenous Nigerian raw materials to rebuild this country across sectors. Now, with that said, agriculture is extremely important to that plan, and so is infrastructural development, when we talk about rural roads in particular, those roads that we have been able to identify across the country, some of them are state-owned roads, some of them are local government-owned roads, those internal roads that link farms to markets, that link major industries to ports, they have been identified. Now, what we're doing is not only are we sourcing all of the raw materials, so for example, where we used to import bitumen, for example, to construct our roads, we're going to be sourcing all of those materials inside of the country in accordance with Presidential Executive Order 003 and Executive Order 005 on local content and procurement in science and engineering projects. Now, with all of that going on, we're going to employ hundreds of thousands of our young people through the National Special Public Works Program, which the Minister of Finance has recently detailed to the public. And what that involves is it involves the employment of 1,000 young people in every local government area of the Federation to ensure equity of distribution of benefits. 1,000 young people in every single local government, comprising, of course, 774,000 young people, will be paid to be engaged in a very labor-intensive program in which they will be given Nigerian raw materials, of course, to reconstruct rural roads across this country so that we will be able to, like I said, most effectively link farms to markets, for example, because we have identified, we listen very carefully to our farmers because the president has made unprecedented developments in the agricultural sector, empowering our farmers with low-interest credit facilities and anchor borrowers program, slashing the price of fertilizer by revitalizing about 31 fertilizer blending plants nationwide. All of these things he's put in place to ensure that we get to a point of food self-sufficiency while substituting our imports. Now, one of the key challenges that still remain is the issue of logistics and transportation for our farmers, because they produce all of this produce, which is fantastic, but then they're not happy because when they want to now transport them to the market, they find that because of the logistical and transportation-based bottlenecks, bad roads, etc., particularly these internal roads, there are a lot of post-harvest losses. And there's a lack of storage capacity. That's the chief complaint that they have brought. So the president said we have to deal with this and we have to deal with it fast. So this massive employment program is going to ensure that we source raw materials, which will obviously create multiplying, reverberating effect on the economy, since we're sourcing everything from local content producers, right, of these various materials. And then our young people are going to use these materials to, of course, reconstruct these internal roads linking markets, farms to markets, etc., to reduce post-harvest losses. All of this is going to be going on at a time when we're also involved actively in enhancing the nation's storage capacity. So one of the key issues that has come up is to say, okay, how do we ensure that if we are going to be enhancing our local production across sectors, not just agriculture, textiles, and all of the other things that we have been investing heavily in over the last 5 years, then how do we get it out to the global market? How do we get it out into the international market to be able to compete favorably with other countries? And one of the major issues is port reform, making sure that our ports are not overly congested, making sure that we have an efficient means of decongesting our ports, decongesting the roads around the ports, etc. And one of the things that the president did, very quickly as I wrap up, because I know we have many other questions coming in, is he looked clearly that he realized, Apapa port is obviously the number one port in the country. It's the one that has been so oversaturated with containers, with various items, to the point that they're now carrying a load, if I'm not mistaken, of about 4 times what the port was originally designed to carry when it was constructed. So we have a crisis there. Then on top of that, the president, when he came in, despite all the money we have made and all the money that we have blown away with corruption and all of that over the years, we failed to invest in additional port infrastructure or to expand existing ports and all of that. So what we had was you have an over-congested port, then you have the road infrastructure around the ports that cannot accommodate the evacuation of the containers from that over-congested port. So you have a double crisis. So now the president worked very quickly and invested very heavily to build trailer parks all across the Apapa port axis so that we will have a place to keep trailers and all of those, stakeholders, their vehicular infrastructure, etc., in these parks to decongest. Meanwhile, Meanwhile, Presidential Executive Order 007, which is the Presidential Executive Order on Road Infrastructure Tax Reimbursement Scheme, allows for private companies that have an interest in a particular federal road to reconstruct that road with world-class, at a world-class quality, because all of it is being monitored and evaluated by Federal Ministry of Works. But they bring their funds, right, and then they construct the road. And then what federal government does is we offer them a calibrated tax relief over a period of years. So Dangote Construction Group undertook the 73 billion naira, if I'm not mistaken, I believe it's 73 billion naira, Apapa Oworonshoki Tollgate Road, which of course we all know has been a nightmare for 30, 40 years. Now that road is at an advanced stage of completion. They're targeting this December to complete that road with world-class cement construction technology. We're very excited about that road opening up and what it's going to mean for our ability to facilitate import and export, even as we continue to work very hard on many of the other ports that are under construction in the country and in development in the country. So we'll get into all of that as the program goes on. But the president has really focused a lot on developing transportation infrastructure at the rural level, because the president recognizes that is the home of the informal economy, where you have tens of millions of Nigerians working hard every day to add value to the economy. And unfortunately, we're still at a point when the National Bureau of Statistics is not reflecting the input and impact of the informal economy on the life of this country. So there you have it. I look forward to more questions, please. Thank you very much. Do we have a caller? Okay, all right. Let's have another question. We have another question on WhatsApp. I just want to take this opportunity to thank all of you who are tuning into this program. I know many of you have busy schedules. You have things that you have to get done or want to get done. So for you to take this time to be with me, I truly appreciate it. Thank you very much, and I hope that it's worth your time and it's enlightening to you. And I always ask those who I interact with, whether it's on television, radio, or with you now on Have Your Say, to please fact check everything I say. Make sure that nobody is here trying to deceive you or to play with you or manipulate you. Fact check what I say so that you can have confidence that we're dealing in facts and we're dealing in truth. Thank you very much. All right. Yes, please. Go ahead. Okay, so we have another question that is coming in that it has to do with rail transportation. You know, this is another major issue. Many of us hear stories from our mothers and fathers and uncles and grandfathers and grandmothers about the glory days of Nigerian railways. And all of us feel that we have lost out because we didn't get to experience those glory days. But the president is changing that story. And he is determined to ensure that we get back to that point. So the question is coming forth now. And I'm sure it will allow us to expand the conversation around what is being done in rail infrastructure. Because really, conversations do not translate necessarily to action. Conversations are intended to describe actions that are taking place, not in like the past where people are having conversations about things that are not getting done. We want to have conversations about things that you can go and you can verify and you can affirm are being done. And so when we talk about rail infrastructure, you know, I talked a bit about the Lagos Ibadan rail line and all of that. I think another major component of that is when we did the initial design, you were running from Iju in Lagos to Abeokuta to Ibadan, right? Now, what the president now did is he said, look, yes, fantastic, passengers will be happy, they can go to Lagos, go to Ibadan through Lagos and all of that, but from Lagos, and they're not going to have to worry too much about traffic or any of these things. But that does not serve the economy if we still have a situation where the Apapa port is not linked up with the rail line. because we need to not just work, we're doing like I mentioned, the Apapa toll gate road to be able to evacuate containers by road out of Apapa port. But the president said that's not enough. We need to be able to evacuate also by rail so that we can truly decongest Apapa port and that axis at large. Now, the question we have is coming from Maduka from Lagos. And the question that he is asking is, what is the government doing regarding rail connection across the country? Yes, so very important to note, yes, and this is a natural concern because we have Nigerians living in every part of Nigeria, of course, and they want to know when rail will reach their side, right? It's very understandable. So look, we undertook a statistical analysis where we identified, given the fact that we have very limited resources, right, and given the fact that the president is determined that we must not just start projects everywhere like we've been seeing from 1999, but we have to now complete what we start. And we don't just have to complete what we start to, we also have to complete what people started before us, right? So that Nigerians can benefit economically and otherwise from those projects that were started. So now, the president did a statistical analysis, right? And we found that where you had the most economic freight, we're talking of food, agricultural items, textiles, and you name it, where you have the most freight movement of these goods is from Lagos to Kano, the two commercial hubs of this country, right? That is where you have the food baskets moving their food into Lagos, from there, kind of disseminating throughout the country. Now, on the basis of that, and given the limited resources we have, the president now said, let us work very aggressively and very quickly to get this one done, so that from here, we can now expand eastward. But let us facilitate the flow of export and import in this country, because that has an impact on every Nigerian in every part of the country, because that's the net import-export flow across the nation. So he did that, and that is why not only did he deal with Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, he dealt with Lagos-Ibadan Rail Line. But I'm sure now at this point, you're probably exhausted hearing about Lagos-Ibadan. You want to know about the other parts of the country. So now, where we are is the president also in his first term, and I think this is one of the most underreported achievements of President Muhammadu Buhari's first term, was the connection, the completion rather, of the rail line from Wari to Itakpe to Ajeokuta. We're talking of over 300 kilometers of rail line, and it was abandoned since 1987. So we're not talking of Fourth Republic, not even talking of Third Republic. We're talking of 1987 and all of that. So it was after 30 years that the president was able to bring that back on stream. He has fully resuscitated that rail line, but he has not stopped there. For those who need a bit of detail or insight into why that rail line is very important, is because in Itakpe, you have the Nigerian Iron Ore Mining Company, NIAMCO. Now, it is that iron ore mining company that will produce the iron ore that you will now send, whether it's by road, whether it's now by rail, since the president has completed it, you now send the iron ore from Itakpe into Ajeokuta, where you have the steel complex that now consumes the iron ore to produce the steel that all of us are talking about, that we all want. Now, the key is that linking it up with Wari is very, very strategic. Why? Because, of course, you have Wari Port. Now, what the president has done is, over the last 3 years or so, we have concluded negotiations with the Chinese rail construction company, CRCC, and they have agreed with us on a $3.1 billion deal that is going to see the construction of a brand new seaport in Wari that is going to be $800 million, an $800 million seaport in Wari. Now, the remaining $2.3 billion, oh, very good, we have pictures of the rail line. The remaining $2.3 billion is going to be used to extend the Wari Itakpe Ajeokuta rail line from Wari town into the brand new Wari seaport. So you're going to be able to have a second seaport where you will have both rail and road evacuation, which is the design of the president. That's on the one hand. So on this side of it, you will link a new high-speed rail line from Wari town to Wari seaport with a brand new port. Then on the other side, the Ajeokuta side, there's going to be, as part of the same $3.1 billion deal, the president has approved that the Warri-Itakpe-Ajeokuta line will now link up with Abuja, with a spur that goes to Lokoja in Kogi State, the confluence point. So now you're going to have, so for all of us to understand, you're going to have the new Warri seaport going to Itakpe with the iron ore, going to Ajeokuta to deliver the iron ore to produce your steel. From Ajeokuta now with a spur to Lokoja up to upward to Abuja. Now, with all of that done, Abuja already is linking to Kaduna with the Abuja-Kaduna rail line already completed. Now, in this second-term administration of the president has now been able to put together the funding for the Ibadan to Kano segment of the Lagos to Ibadan rail line. You know, of course, we've done Lagos-Ibadan. We're just tidying up the last part, which is the extension from Iju in Lagos to Ebute Metta to Apapa Port. Now, so once that's done, you'll have from Apapa Port into Lagos, Abeokuta, Ibadan. Now, the second leg that is being done within this second-term administration, I believe construction starts by September, is the extension from Ibadan through the southwest capitals to reach Ilorin, from Ilorin to Minna, from Minna to Abuja. So now you're going to have the entire western link coming to Abuja, the southern link coming from Warri through Itakpe to Ajeokuta, through Lokoja to Abuja, meeting there. Then from Abuja to Kaduna. Then from Kaduna, you will now go to Kano. Now, the second leg of Ibadan-Kano is in 4 segments. You have the Ibadan to Ibadan through the southwest capitals to Ilorin, right? 1 segment. Then Ilorin to Minna, 2nd segment. Then Minna to Abuja, 3rd segment. And then the 4th and final segment is Kaduna to Kano. But we're constructing it not from Kaduna, but from the Kano end. So we're going to start construction from the Kano end and build down to the existing Abuja-Kaduna rail line. So you're going to have a perfect symmetry, moving from the south to the middle, north to the middle, west to the middle, through the north central. Now, the question that we have been asked, of course, very naturally, is about the Eastern Corridor. Of course, there's a lot of interest right now in the Eastern Corridor. The Port Harcourt-Maiduguri rail line is projected at about $14 billion. That's 14 billion US dollars to do a high-speed rail line from Port Harcourt to Maiduguri. What we have on the ground already is a narrow gauge rail line. That is the slow rail line that runs all the way through from Port Harcourt to Maiduguri, which we have been working very, very hard to have a legitimate world-class concessionaire come and fix. So we have been working on that. Now, in the interim period, because again, dearth of resources, you're looking at how to manage the resources of the country, given all the various needs, and 50 years worth of deficit across sectors that you're trying to deal with. So for us now, the key is with the coastal rail line we've talked about, you know, Lagos to Calabar, all through the Niger Delta and all of that. What is it that we can afford to do now that will have a massive impact immediately, right? And then one of the conclusions was that just as we have built the Boni-Bodo road, and I'm sure we'll get into that again. I have another question here, so let me wrap up very quickly. We're working on the Boni to Port Harcourt, to Aba, to Uyo, to Calabar, high-speed rail line. That's a $3.4 billion rail line that has been approved by the National Assembly within the framework of the $22.7 billion infrastructure stimulus program that we have put forward. In addition to many other programs, $5.5 billion from Mambila. Of course, that's where you have funding for the Ibadan to Kano segment of the Lagos to Kano rail line that I've described. That's another $5.3 billion as part of that larger package. So $3.4 billion is going to be for the Boni, Port Harcourt, with an industrial park in Port Harcourt, into Aba, of course, which is a major manufacturing hub, a commercial center for us, into Uyo, then Calabar, and all of that. So you're going to have a linkage between southeast, south-south, and into, of course, Abuja with what I've mentioned. So there's a lot going on in terms of rail connectivity around the country. Okay, I'm told we now have a caller on the line. Okay, please go ahead. Thank you. Yes. Okay. No, I cannot. At the moment, I'm trying to hear the caller. If the caller can be put through, please.
Okay.
Yes, I can hear him. Yes, please go ahead, my good friend.
Yeah, this is Emeka calling from Cuba.
Thank you very much, Emeka.
Yes. I'm interested in the areas regarding how judiciously is the government tapping into the productivity of transportation and national development, particularly in the case of transportation systems that are so bad in Nigeria as regards movement of goods and services in the country. We have been seeing the government in recent times trying to maximize the use of railway transport. What other measures are being put in place? Because it is essential that we incorporate transportation effectively in our national development plan to help ease the process of movement of goods and services and individuals, because our microeconomy also depends on these outputs.
Absolutely. Emeka from Kubwa, I thank you very much for taking the time to call us this morning. Let me just go ahead and address your question directly. I've spent a lot of time talking about rail, but you're very correct when you say that road is of equal, if not more importance, because when you talk road, you're talking about the deep penetration into the nooks and crannies of this country that you cannot possibly cover all by rail. Let me just start by saying that in every axis I have mentioned, the president has been very adamant that there must be accompanying reconstructed road infrastructure. So just for example, Lagos-Ibadan rail line that we're talking about extending now into Kano, now that we've completed Lagos to Ibadan, most of it. We have simultaneously, not waiting until it is done, simultaneously we have been reconstructing the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, which is going to be completed in 2022. All the projects I'm going to mention on this program will be completed by 2023. Before Mr. President leaves office, every project I mentioned, with the exception of perhaps the Wari Seaport, I think that's one that may extend beyond 2023 and all of that. But all the other ones, Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, Lagos-Ibadan-Kano rail line, Lagos-Ibadan rail line, all of that will be done by 2022. So in the Lagos-Ibadan axis, you have the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway to accompany the rail line. In the northern axis, from Abuja, Kaduna, which is now being extended Kaduna to Kano as part of the Lagos to Kano rail line, you are also going to have the ongoing reconstruction. It's already started. They've made, I think they're at about 30% now, on the Abuja, Kaduna, Zaria, Kano Expressway, which we have expanded to, I think, about 6 lanes, done by Julius Berger. So that's 375 kilometers of reconstructed and expanded expressway to accommodate or to facilitate movement of goods and services, in addition to the Lagos to Kano rail line. So the president, like you said, he has been looking at both sides of it and making sure that we don't have a situation where we overburden one because one is bad. That's what we have been doing. Rail has not been there, so we overburden our roads. Our roads become deplorable very quickly because of excess burden. So now the president has said, let us simultaneously deal with the two so that there is not an overburdening of the rail system or the road system. Everybody can